You are listening to Fictional Radio Broadcast, live reports from fictional events. This broadcast is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. What follows is a dramatized scenario.
If you are listening anywhere in the Puyallup River Valley, do not wait for Mount Rainier to erupt. Do not go outside to look for ash. Do not wait for an earthquake. Do not use a quiet mountain as proof that you are safe. 3 Lahar detectors have activated on Rainier's western drainage, and the first evacuation sirens are already sounding. The volcano has not erupted. Something has left the mountain anyway. This is Daniel Hale at AM 1720. The time is 3:41 in the morning, Pacific time. And before I tell you what is developing south and east of us, I need to take about 30 seconds for something I plan to say under much quieter circumstances. For those of you who have been listening during the last several nights, yes, I am back. I have been away from this desk for a few days. Ethan Cole has been handling the overnight chair. He covered late weather, 2 emergency communications tests, a transformer outage that briefly convinced half of Tacoma there was a major grid problem, and apparently an entire hour of listener calls about lights over Commencement Bay that turned out to be aircraft holding through cloud. Ethan, if you are home and listening, thank you. You kept the station steady. You kept the emergency board organized, and you somehow returned my desk with fewer coffee stains than it had when I left. I expected tonight to be my quiet return. It will not be. At 3:34 this morning, an automated monitoring station on Mount Rainier's western drainage detected ground vibration consistent with a large debris flow. At 3:37, a second station triggered. At 3:40, a third station triggered. Pierce County emergency systems have acknowledged those detections. Outdoor warning sirens are beginning to activate in portions of the Puyallup Valley. At this moment, there is no confirmed eruption at Mount Rainier. There is no confirmed major earthquake. There is no ash advisory. There is no confirmed volcanic explosion. That does not make the Lahar warning false. I am going to be careful with language all morning. If something is confirmed, I will tell you it is confirmed. If it is preliminary, I will tell you it is preliminary. If we do not know, I will say we do not know. And right now, we do not know what started this. What we do know is that something large enough to activate a system built specifically for fast-moving volcanic debris is moving through Rainier's western drainage. If you are inside a marked Lahar evacuation zone and you hear sirens, do not wait for this broadcast to give you a visual explanation. Follow the route. Move toward designated high ground. The explanation can come later. If the detectors are correct, time cannot. Let me establish the conditions before the phones become too busy. It is pre-dawn across the South Sound. Temperatures in the lowlands are cool. There is broken cloud over parts of Pierce County. No major storm system is moving across the immediate Rainier area. No intense rainfall has been reported overnight. Traffic before this interruption was light. No county-wide evacuation notices were active when I sat down at this desk. Mount Rainier itself was listed under normal monitoring conditions before these detections. That point is going to matter. A volcano can create more than one kind of emergency. Most people hear Rainier and imagine eruption, ash, explosions, lava, a plume visible for miles. But one of Rainier's most serious hazards is different. Lahar is a fast-moving mixture of water, mud, rock, ice, sediment, trees, and whatever else it collects. Think less like a river. Think more like wet concrete moving downhill with the landscape inside it. And importantly, Lahar does not require a large eruption. That is why the valley has warning sirens. That is why the detectors exist. Because one dangerous possibility is an event that begins before the volcano provides the kind of warning people expect. The first automated signal reached the emergency relay at approximately 3:34. We did not interrupt immediately because one detector is not enough information. Equipment can fail. Local rockfall can trigger vibration. A maintenance issue can create a bad reading. Then the second station activated. Then the third. Those detections are separated geographically. We are waiting for a complete sequence. A county dispatcher has now confirmed that the siren network south of Ording has been activated. Again, not a test. I have already received 3 station messages asking whether this is the monthly siren drill. It is not. If you are hearing sirens, move. Do not walk into the street and look toward the mountain. Do not waste time deciding whether the warning sounds dramatic enough. Take essential medication if it is immediately accessible. Take children. Take people who need help moving. If your vehicle can leave immediately and authorities are directing vehicle evacuation, use it. If roads are already congested and officials direct you toward a pedestrian route, follow that instruction. The objective is elevation, not distance along the river. Elevation. There is one phrase I want you to remember because I may repeat it many times. High ground first, explanation second. It is 3:47. We now have a preliminary statement relayed through the County Emergency Network. The substance is this. Multiple monitoring stations on the western drainage of Mount Rainier have recorded signals consistent with a significant debris flow. The origin, composition, and current volume are still under review. There is no confirmed explosive eruption. There is no confirmed major seismic event associated with the initial detection. Residents in identified downstream Lahar hazard zones are instructed to follow outdoor warning sirens and local evacuation guidance. That is the entire useful part. No eruption, no large earthquake. Lahar warning active. Those 3 facts can coexist. I want to deal with the obvious explanation immediately. Could the detectors simply be wrong? Possible with 1, less likely with 3. We still need independent confirmation. Could this be a normal river flood? Conditions do not support that explanation right now. Could there have been a local landslide? Yes, that is one of the leading possibilities. Could glacial ice or stored meltwater have released suddenly? Possible. Could part of the mountain have failed without an eruption? Also possible. We do not yet know which. A household southeast of Ording has reported a vibration in hanging lights that continued after traffic on their road stopped. A second household says they can hear something distant and continuous from the direction of the valley. Neither report is independently verified. I am not offering animal behavior, strange smells, or rumors as proof. We are staying with useful information. The useful part is persistent vibration. A large debris flow can announce itself through the ground before a person can see it. The county is asking residents not to call emergency dispatch, simply to ask whether the sirens are real. They are real. Dispatch lines need to remain available for people who cannot evacuate without assistance. I am also going to acknowledge one personal detail now, because if this continues, some of you will hear it in my voice eventually. My sister lives in the valley, not directly beside the river, but inside an area where evacuation planning matters. I am not going to give her street. I am not going to turn the station into a private family line. She knows the route. We have talked about it. More than once. I told her years ago that if those sirens ever sound, she is not supposed to call me first. She is supposed to leave. So if she is listening, do what we agreed. Move. I will find you later. 3:53. We have independent confirmation that a debris flow is physically present in the upper drainage. A county unit positioned above a river crossing reports a moving mass containing timber and large rock. Personnel are withdrawing farther uphill. No injuries reported from that unit. This is no longer a sensor-only event. Something is moving. Now I want to give you context, because the absence of an eruption is going to confuse people. Rainier has produced major lahars in the past that were not necessarily driven by the kind of explosive eruption most people imagine. One event geologists study closely is the electron mud flow. Centuries ago, a huge mass of weakened material from Rainier's western side moved into the Puyallup drainage and traveled far into the lowlands. The important lesson is not the exact date or exact volume. The lesson is mechanism. Rainier contains areas of rock altered by hot, chemically active groundwater over long periods. Strong volcanic rock can gradually become weaker, clay-rich material. Imagine a mountain that looks solid from the outside, while parts of its internal structure have been chemically softened. If enough of that weakened material fails, gravity does the rest. No fire required. No dramatic eruption required. That is one reason a detection system exists independently from the volcano alert system. The mountain can be volcanically quiet and still produce a destructive mass movement. That does not mean tonight is another electron event. Do not jump that far. It means the phrase no eruption is not the same as no danger. We have a fourth detector now. The sequence is farther downstream. This gives us direction. Whatever triggered the upper stations is moving through the valley network. Emergency management has changed wording in one sector. Earlier language was prepare to evacuate. The current language is evacuate immediately. That is the first important change of the morning, and we are only 12 minutes into continuous coverage. 3:59. A report has come in from a resident east of the valley who reached higher terrain before the road below became congested. The person describes the sound as sustained thunder with no break between rolls. Another report describes a freight train heard at a distance where no train should be running. Those descriptions are consistent with known debris flow behavior. They are not mysterious. They are dangerous. If you hear a deep, continuous roar from the valley, do not go toward it. There is another detail in one report that we are trying to verify. A family says they heard the low sound several minutes before their local siren activated. That could be because sound travels differently through terrain. It could be because their local siren was delayed. It could be a timing error in their recollection. People do not carry laboratory clocks during emergencies, but we are writing down the report because timing matters. The warning system is designed to move information faster than the hazard moves through populated areas. If any part of that timing chain is slower than expected, downstream guidance may need to change. For now, authorities are not saying the warning system failed. Sirens are sounding. People are moving. That matters. Traffic is increasing rapidly on several uphill routes. State and county units are beginning closures in the lowest corridors. If you are already on high ground, stay there. Do not drive back down to collect property. Do not drive into the valley to pick up someone who is already evacuating unless authorities have specifically directed you. People trying to help can unintentionally block the road for everyone. One more update before we move into the next phase. A monitoring desk has provided a preliminary source area. They are looking at the western flank, not the summit crater. That changes the question. We are no longer asking only whether Rainier erupted without anyone detecting it. We are asking what part of Rainier can move without an eruption at all. 4:05. One remote monitoring station has stopped transmitting. We do not know if it was physically damaged. It may have lost power. It may have lost the communications link. Its final packet shows elevated vibration, then nothing. That is the first monitoring loss. The downstream stations remain active. This is an important distinction. Loss of one sensor does not mean the flow stopped. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a monitoring device can report is silence after it has already reported danger. County Emergency Management is now asking residents in Ording and identified low zones nearby to complete evacuation without delay. A school facility that was holding an overnight youth event has moved attendees toward designated high ground. Emergency personnel are checking assisted living addresses. Several buses are being repositioned. Traffic controllers are opening additional uphill movement where possible. Cell service remains functional but heavily loaded. Do not repeatedly call the same person. Use one text if you can. Short, location, status, where you are going. That is more useful than 20 missed calls. I tried my sister once. No connection. I sent one message. It is not shown as delivered. I am not trying again yet. The network belongs to everyone right now. We are going to stay on the air, and in the next few minutes, we expect the first scientific estimate of what actually left the mountain. 4:10. The first direct visual descriptions from emergency personnel are becoming clearer. A debris front has entered sections of the upper valley channel. The flow contains trees, large rock, mud, water, and pieces of material responders cannot identify from their position. One bridge team withdrew before the leading edge reached them. All personnel accounted for. The river level at one monitoring point rose rapidly, then the gauge became unreliable. A field officer described the channel as no longer functioning like a river. That wording is useful. The Lahar is not simply water filling a river. The moving mass is occupying and reshaping the channel. This is why ordinary flood instincts can be dangerous. A normal flood may rise around stationary structures. A dense debris flow can move the structures. It can carry trees lengthwise. It can push vehicles. It can strike bridge supports with rock. It can temporarily block a channel, then release it. If you are waiting because you believe your house is several feet above ordinary flood level, that is not enough information. Use the mapped Lahar zone and official evacuation instructions. We now have 12 emergency-related logs tied to the event. That does not mean 12 destroyed locations. Some are duplicate alarms. Some are medical assistance calls. Some are road closures. Some are sensor reports. Numbers are useful only when we explain what they mean. 12 logs means 12 pieces of the emergency system are now reacting. Another number, 3 local cell sites are operating under unusually high load. Not failed. High load. That may become important later. The valley is trying to leave and contact itself at the same time. 4:16. A geologist working with regional response has given an initial explanation. The current working possibility is a flank failure involving weakened rock and glacial material. That would fit the lack of a major explosive eruption. A section of hydrothermally altered material could fail under gravity. Snow and ice could be incorporated. River water could be incorporated. Sediment could be collected downstream. The flow could grow substantially from the original collapse volume. That explanation fits several observations. It explains why debris is moving without an ash plume. It explains why there was no large volcanic earthquake beforehand. It explains why the flow contains rock, timber, and large amounts of sediment. It may explain the sulfur-like odor reported by 2 responders. Hydrothermally altered material can carry mineral odors when freshly exposed and mixed with water. That is a working explanation, not a final explanation. And there is already a problem with it. The earliest rough estimate of the source volume appears too small to account for the duration of the downstream signals. That could mean the original estimate is wrong. It could mean the Lahar has incorporated far more water and sediment than expected. It could mean more than one part of the slope failed, or it could mean material is still entering the drainage. That final possibility has not been confirmed. We are watching it. Emergency guidance is expanding north. Parts of Puyallup and Sumner are being told to review immediate evacuation routes. Some industrial operators farther downstream are beginning precautionary shutdown procedures. Do not interpret precautionary as optional. It means officials are trying to act before direct impact. The word precautionary usually disappears when confirmation arrives. 4:22. We have a measurement that changes the story. A response team collected water and slurry temperature from a protected position near one of the upper crossings. The first reading is being treated as preliminary. The material is significantly warmer than expected for a debris flow dominated by late-night river water and glacial melt. Not boiling. Not steaming, nothing like lava, but warm enough that scientists immediately asked for the measurement to be repeated. The repeat reading is close. That matters. A glacial outburst explanation would normally begin with very cold water. A rain-driven event would reflect atmospheric and surface conditions. Neither immediately explains material arriving substantially warmer than expected. The current hypothesis is that the moving slurry contains a large amount of material that spent prolonged time in contact with Rainier's hydrothermal system. That does not mean magma is exposed. It does not mean an eruption has started underground. It means the source may involve deeper, chemically altered water-saturated rock rather than only surface snow, ice, and loose debris. This is the first point tonight where the original image of a landslide becomes incomplete. A surface collapse falls. This material may have come from within a weakened part of the mountain, and there is something else. The seismic network still does not show the kind of large fracture signal scientists would expect from a sudden collapse, big enough to explain everything downstream. The debris flow is real. The warm material is real. The missing large collapse signal is also real. So either the event was smaller at the source and grew enormously downstream, or the mountain failed in a way that did not break rock the way the models expected. That is the 422 problem, and I suspect we are going to spend the rest of this morning trying to solve it. 427. We have a second category of problem. Engineers reviewing detector timestamps have found an inconsistency. One downstream monitoring location appears to have registered vibration before the public alert sequence from the preceding upstream station fully transmitted. That does not mean the flow moved backward. It does not mean anything impossible happened. There are several ordinary explanations: clock synchronization, buffered data, communications delay, local transmission failure, damage to a relay path. But two independent timing sources have now been compared, and at least part of the discrepancy remains. A county road camera in one sector lost useful visibility before the public-facing alert for that immediate zone was distributed. Again, warning still occurred. Sirens still activated. People did receive time. But the assumption that the information chain was consistently ahead of the flow is now being challenged. Emergency management is changing guidance because of that. Downstream residents inside mapped Lahar zones should not wait for the nearest siren if confirmed evacuation is already underway upstream and local authorities have instructed broader movement. This is a major change. For almost an hour, the warning system was describing the flow. Now part of the response is trying to get ahead of a flow that may be compressing the warning time. That is not panic. That is adaptation. If you are already on high ground, stay there. If you are still in the low valley and you have been instructed to leave, go. Do not wait for a second message to agree with the first one. 432. I have the county evacuation map on the desk. I know one section of it too well. My sister's route. We went over it 2 summers ago. I made her walk part of it. She accused me of turning a Sunday visit into an emergency management seminar. Fair criticism. But I wanted her to know what the arrows looked like when she was not scared. The route leaves the lower neighborhood and climbs east. The problem tonight is traffic. One intersection near that route is listed as heavily congested. Police are directing some people out of vehicles toward pedestrian evacuation paths. If she followed the plan early, she may already be above that. If she waited, I do not know. Her phone still does not connect. The message remains undelivered. I am going to leave it alone, and I am going to use this personal situation for one practical point. Do not make your family plan dependent on one person answering a phone. Have a destination. Have a route. Have an alternate. If the network works, excellent. If it does not, everybody should already know what to do. A listener from a nearby evacuation corridor reports that traffic stopped completely and people began leaving cars after officers opened a marked uphill path. Families are moving together. Some people left without coats, some without shoes. That tells you how quickly normal decision-making can disappear. The correct emergency kit is useful. The correct emergency action is more useful. If your bag is on the other side of the house and the siren is sounding, do not spend 5 minutes perfecting your bag. Move. 437. A reconnaissance helicopter is being prepared to view the western flank as weather allows. The objective is simple. Find the source. Scientists want to know whether there is a large collapse scar, a glacier failure, a new fracture, steam, thermal change, anything visible that can explain how much material is entering the valley. Cloud remains an issue near portions of the mountain. The aircraft will use thermal imaging where possible. This is important because the entire response is currently operating on downstream evidence, sensors, flow, water chemistry, debris, river behavior. We know what is coming out. We do not know what the source looks like. That is backwards from how people imagine a volcanic disaster. Normally, the mountain announces itself and the valley waits. Tonight, the valley is telling us something happened to the mountain. The mountain has not explained itself yet. The helicopter is expected over the source zone within minutes. We are also getting the first broader shelter figures. More than 300 people have reached designated reception points. That is not the total evacuated population. It is simply the number processed at several locations, reporting quickly enough to be counted. Many evacuees are staying with family or moving to informal high-ground gathering areas. Do not use shelter numbers as an estimate of how many people escaped, and do not use missing phone contact as an estimate of how many did not. Communications are already getting worse. 443. The debris flow has entered areas immediately upstream of Ording. Emergency personnel on high ground report a broad, dark, moving surface carrying timber and structural debris. The flow is outside the normal channel in places. The town's evacuation sirens remain active. Most organized evacuation routes were already moving before this confirmation. That is good news inside a very bad situation. Some residents did not leave. Dispatch is still receiving calls from people asking whether they can remain on upper floors. The answer from emergency officials is no. A building is not the same as high ground. A lahar can damage or move structures. If your evacuation route remains available, use it. Search and rescue crews will not enter active flow zones simply because someone decided to wait. That may sound harsh. It is not punishment. It is physics. The helicopter is now approaching the western flank, and we are told the first images do not show what scientists expected. 447. The helicopter team has provided a preliminary visual description. There is no obvious single catastrophic collapse scar large enough to explain the entire event. Let me repeat that. They went looking for the missing piece of mountain. They did not find one. There are disturbed areas. There are fresh surfaces. There are sections of the western flank where snow and debris patterns have changed, but there is no giant missing wedge, no single fresh avalanche bowl, no crater, no obvious source that says this much material fell from here all at once. Instead, the team is reporting broad subsidence. A section of glacier surface appears lower than expected across a large area, not broken away. Lower. The preliminary estimate is difficult in darkness and cloud, but the change appears distributed rather than concentrated. Thermal imaging is showing elevated temperatures across parts of the disturbed area. Again, not eruptive temperatures. No glowing magma. No fire, but warmer than surrounding frozen terrain. Scientists are asking whether water-saturated, hydrothermally altered material beneath the glacier has begun to deform and drain rather than fracture and fall. That would explain something important. Why the seismic network did not record one enormous collapse. Fracturing rock makes one kind of signal. Saturated clay-rich material moving gradually makes another. A slow structural failure could begin quietly, then accelerate as material enters steeper drainage, then become loud only after it is already moving as a lahar. One member of the reconnaissance team used a phrase in the preliminary relay that I think will become important. The mountain does not look like it collapsed. It looks like part of it settled. That is the careful wording. I am going to avoid the more dramatic version until scientists confirm what they mean, but the implication is serious. If this is distributed internal failure rather than one landslide, the source may still be active. 453. The monitoring network now shows sustained activity at the upper stations. This is not simply a leading edge moving downstream and leaving quiet behind it. At least 2 upstream detectors continue to record debris flow vibration. That suggests additional material is entering the drainage. Again, could be secondary pulses, could be bank collapse, could be material released behind temporary blockages. But combined with the reconnaissance report, scientists are considering continuous source input. That changes evacuation planning. A single lahar pulse has a front, a body, and eventually a decline. A continuously fed flow can remain dangerous far longer. It can build sediment, shift channels, create temporary dams, release secondary surges. And most importantly, it removes the simple idea that once the first wave passes, the valley is safe. There is no all clear. I am using that phrase now because emergency management is using it. No all clear. If you have reached high ground, stay there. People in one evacuated area have already begun asking when they can go home. Not now. Do not descend because you hear less noise. Do not descend because the river appears lower from where you are. Do not descend because daylight is coming. The source may still be feeding the system. 5 o'clock. We have received a technical assessment from a volcanologist assisting the response. I am going to paraphrase it carefully because I do not want a poor phone connection turning one technical phrase into 10 rumors. The western flank of Rainier contains zones of hydrothermally altered rock. Over long periods, hot acidic fluids can change strong volcanic material into weaker clay-bearing rock. Some of that material can remain stable only because pressure, temperature, water content, ice load, and slope geometry remain within a narrow balance. If groundwater pressure rises, if thermal conditions change, if glacier loading shifts, or if enough small internal movement occurs, the material may deform. The key word is deform, not necessarily fracture. The expert compared the difference to breaking a dry block of chalk versus slowly squeezing wet clay. The chalk produces a clear break, the clay changes shape. A seismic network is excellent at detecting many kinds of rock fracture and movement. But a broad zone of saturated material creeping, liquefying, and accelerating may not announce itself with one obvious earthquake. By the time it reaches a confined drainage and begins carrying boulders, trees, and sediment, the lahar detectors see it clearly. That explanation almost solves the mystery. Almost. Here is what it does not solve. The amount of material still entering the upper drainage appears substantial. If the failure zone is as broad as the reconnaissance team suspects, scientists do not yet know how much of the weakened mass is involved, and they do not know where the stable boundary is. In plain language, they know part of the mountain is moving. They do not yet know how much of the neighboring material has decided to move with it. That is where the model ends. 5:05. We have an updated aerial relay. The glacier surface over part of the western failure zone appears to have dropped further during the observation period. The change is small compared with the height of the mountain, but it is measurable enough that the flight team requested immediate comparison with older elevation data. The phrase now being used internally is subsidence over a distributed hydrothermal failure zone. That is the technical version. One field scientist described it more simply. Part of the mountain is deflating. I am going to be careful with that phrase. The mountain is not a balloon. It is not hollow. The entire volcano is not sinking. What the scientist means is that weakened material beneath a section of the glacier may be losing structural volume as saturated debris drains into the headwaters. The surface above settles because material below is leaving. That is very different from a cliff collapsing all at once. It is also why the source can continue. Imagine a heavy sheet of ice resting on material that is becoming progressively softer underneath. The weight does not disappear. It presses. The soft material has somewhere downhill to go. That does not mean this process can continue indefinitely. It means nobody on air can tell you the stopping point yet. This is the major scientific change of the morning. At 3:41, we were asking whether a Lahar detector was wrong. At 4:16, we were asking whether a landslide caused the Lahar. At 5:05, we are asking whether part of Rainier's weakened interior is draining gradually enough to avoid the kind of warning a sudden collapse would have produced. That is a different emergency. 5:10. Conditions around Ording remain severe. The main debris front has passed through sections of the lower valley, but upstream monitoring remains active. Roads in the lowest areas are not passable. Several bridges are under structural assessment or closed entirely. Power is out across parts of the affected corridor. Emergency crews positioned on high ground are waiting for sufficient stability before entering. There are people still unaccounted for. I am not giving you a number because the early lists are mostly communication lists. A family member calling a shelter does not make someone officially missing. A phone that does not ring does not create a casualty. We will not turn uncertainty into a death count. One evacuation site reports people arriving in groups after abandoning vehicles. Another is receiving elderly residents transported by emergency buses. A medical team is treating minor injuries from falls during evacuation. The emergency is producing ordinary injuries too. People rushing on dark stairs, people walking without shoes, people carrying children farther than they expected, people with respiratory conditions standing outside in cold air. If you are at a shelter and you need medication, tell staff. Do not hide a medical problem because you think someone else deserves help more. Triage only works when responders know what exists. I tried my sister again. The call connected for less than a second. No voice. Then it dropped. That is actually more information than I had 10 minutes ago. It means the device reached some part of the network. I am going to take that as data. Nothing more. 5:15. The evacuation zone has expanded. Sumner lowlands are under immediate movement orders in specified areas. Puyallup is escalating evacuation in river-adjacent zones. Tacoma's industrial lowlands are being placed under heightened readiness. Port operators are initiating protective shutdowns. Rail traffic through portions of the valley is being stopped. This is no longer a mountain emergency. It is an infrastructure emergency. Every system built across the valley now becomes part of the response. Roads, bridges, rail, substations, fiber lines. Fuel facilities, warehouses, storm drains, sewer systems, cell towers, water mains. The Lahar does not need to directly destroy every one of them. It only needs to interrupt enough connections. A road closure prevents utility crews from reaching a substation. A substation failure removes power from a cell tower. A cell tower failure creates more uncertainty about evacuations. More uncertainty sends more people onto roads. More traffic slows emergency vehicles. That is cascading failure. Not dramatic, not mysterious. Just one connected system leaning on another until several begin to fall together. And we have the first sign of it. One communications fiber route through the lower valley has become unstable. Our station is still receiving the emergency network feed, but packets are arriving with delays. We have backup paths. For now. 5:20. I have learned something I did not want to learn. My sister was scheduled for a late shift at a clinic in Puyallup. I believed she was at home. A neighbor reached one of our producers and said her car was not in the driveway when evacuation began. That may mean she was still at work. The clinic is on the valley floor. It is within the area now, under evacuation. We have tried the clinic's main number. No answer. That does not mean the building is occupied. It may have evacuated. The line may be down. The staff may be using another facility. I am saying these possibilities aloud because there are people listening who are doing the same thing with their own family. The mind does not like incomplete information. It fills empty space, usually with the worst thing available. Do not let it turn silence into certainty. My sister may have left hours ago. She may be standing in a shelter with a dead phone. She may be helping patients move. She may be in traffic. I do not know. So I continue with what I do know. The Lahar is advancing downstream. The source remains active. Puyallup and Sumner are moving people, and the low sky over the east is beginning to lighten. 5:24. We want to remind listeners that you are tuned to Fictional Radio Broadcast, continuing to monitor this developing situation. AM 1720 remains on continuous emergency coverage through the FRB Emergency Network. Our main transmitter is stable. Backup power is available. One remote receiver in the valley has stopped reporting. A second is intermittent. Incoming county data is now delayed by approximately 40 seconds on one route. That may not sound like much. During normal programming, 40 seconds is nothing. During an evacuation, 40 seconds can become a street, a staircase, a bridge approach, a family deciding whether to leave. We are shifting toward direct radio relay where possible. The technology of this broadcast is becoming simpler as the disaster becomes larger. That is usually how emergencies work. More advanced systems fail into older ones. Streaming becomes cellular, cellular becomes landline, landline becomes radio, radio becomes one transmitter, and anyone who still has a receiver. If that becomes us, we will keep talking. 5:27. We have confirmed debris-laden flooding entering parts of the Puyallup lowland corridor. The river is overtopping or bypassing normal boundaries in multiple locations. One road camera shows a broad, dark surface moving through an area that was dry less than 10 minutes earlier. The image then becomes obscured. The data connection continues. The picture does not. Engineers believe sediment coated the lens. A second camera farther downstream is still active. Traffic is moving uphill in lines. Police are opening pedestrian access on one route after vehicles stopped. People are leaving cars. That is now official instruction in that location. If officers direct you to abandon a vehicle, leave it. Do not spend time locking it. Do not unload everything. Take people. Take medication. Take mobility equipment if it can move with you immediately. Then climb. Tacoma is now on the operational map. Not all Tacoma. Low-lying industrial and river-connected areas. That distinction matters. Do not create citywide gridlock by evacuating from safe high ground into the path of people leaving low ground. Know your zone. The next 30 minutes are about Tacoma. 5:31. Tacoma emergency officials are issuing evacuation and restricted access instructions for specified low-lying industrial areas associated with the Puyallup River and tide flats. Again, specified areas. Tacoma is not one flat surface. Many neighborhoods sit well above the immediate Lahar corridor. If you are not in an evacuation zone, stay off the roads unless you need to move for another emergency. Port operations are being reduced or halted in multiple sections. Rail yards are suspending movements. Industrial facilities are initiating emergency shutdown procedures. Hazardous material teams are being staged uphill. This is a secondary hazard problem now. A Lahar entering an industrial zone does not remain only a geology story. Fuel, electrical systems, storage tanks, chemicals, warehouses, pipelines, rail cars, storm drains, every one of those systems was designed with limits. A dense debris flow does not care which limit belongs to which engineering department. That is why emergency officials are clearing workers before direct contact. We have no confirmed major hazardous material release. Do not repeat claims of explosions at the port. One bright flash reported online has been matched with an electrical fault. No evidence of a major fuel fire at this time. Stay with verified information. 5:35. Tacoma is waking into this. Phones are lighting up across the city. People who went to sleep under a quiet mountain are waking to evacuation maps. Some can hear sirens from miles away, some cannot. Some are looking east and seeing Rainier between clouds. The mountain looks almost normal. That is going to create disbelief. I need you to understand the danger of visual reassurance. You can look directly at Rainier and see no ash plume, no lava, no fire, no giant explosion. You can see snow. You can see cloud. You can see a mountain that looks like every photograph you have ever seen of it. The destructive part is already below. Do not measure a downstream Lahar by the appearance of the summit. The source can be quiet while the valley is not. Our own staff stepped to a rear window several minutes ago. From this station, the horizon toward Rainier is becoming visible. Nothing about it looks cinematic. That is what makes this morning difficult to process. A mountain does not need to look angry to be unstable. 5:40. There are reports of water appearing in some low-lying areas ahead of the confirmed debris front. We are treating the mechanism as preliminary. Hydrologists are considering whether river blockage, rapidly changing channel pressure, backed storm drainage, and shallow groundwater response are contributing. Do not assume every flooded basement means the Lahar itself has arrived. But do not use that uncertainty as a reason to stay. If your area is under evacuation, the source of water in the yard is academically interesting and operationally irrelevant. Leave. One parking area in Sumner has water emerging through drains, while the nearest surface channel remains several blocks away. Another neighborhood reports storm drains running backward. Again, secondary hydraulic effects. The valley is not only receiving material from upstream, it is responding to a river system being forced outside its normal behavior. This is why a large Lahar becomes more than one moving wall. It changes the way water and infrastructure behave around it. 5:44. The studio phone rang on a line we have not published during this emergency. It was my sister. The connection lasted 28 seconds. She is alive. She was at the clinic when the evacuation order reached them. They moved patients who could walk first. Emergency transport took several others. She left with 2 staff members after the building was cleared. Traffic stopped. They went on foot toward higher ground. She did not know exactly where she was when she called. The signal was poor. I heard several people around her. I heard a warning siren. And underneath it, I heard something lower, continuous. She said they could hear the flow somewhere below them. She also said something I am going to repeat because it is useful. The ground had been vibrating long enough that people stopped noticing it until they reached pavement that was not moving. Then the call failed. I do not have confirmation that she reached the shelter. I do not know whether she is injured, but she was moving uphill. That is the best information I have had all morning, and I am going to turn that into advice for everyone else. Keep climbing until officials tell you to stop. Do not descend because the first roar fades. Do not descend because the first surge passes. The source remains active. Temporary blockages can form. Secondary pulses can follow. High ground is not a waiting room you leave when you get bored. It is where you remain until the people monitoring the valley tell you the valley is safe. 5:49. We now have confirmation that debris-laden floodwater associated with the Rainier Lahar has entered low-lying portions of the Tacoma Industrial Corridor. This is the moment the title of this emergency becomes literal. Mount Rainier's Lahar has reached Tacoma. Again, not the entire city. Do not turn one geographic statement into another. The affected zone is concentrated in low elevations connected to the river and industrial waterfront. Emergency crews have withdrawn from several approaches. Rail operations are halted. Roads are closed. Power faults are increasing. One industrial facility reports debris striking perimeter fencing and ground-level structures. Another has shut down completely after losing commercial power. A bridge inspection team has reported debris impacts against supports. No public access is allowed. Do not approach closed bridges. Do not walk onto them to take photographs. One of the most common ways people turn surviving the first phase of a disaster into becoming part of the second is by treating damage as something to inspect personally. Stay away. 5:54. Our primary digital data route from the County Emergency Center has failed. The line did not gradually degrade. It stopped. Our engineer has traced the likely break to infrastructure crossing the lower valley. We are now relying on backup radio relay, a secondary landline, and delayed emergency network packets. The transmitter remains stable. The studio has power. We are not in the primary Lahar zone. But the broadcast is more vulnerable than it was 10 minutes ago. One remote receiver near Fife has disappeared from the board. A second is showing intermittent carrier. The lower frequency hum I mentioned earlier is now noticeable through the desk if you rest your hand on it. I am not telling you that for atmosphere. I am telling you because it demonstrates scale. We are several miles from the active channel and well above it. The event is large enough that low-frequency vibration is reaching infrastructure outside the inundation zone. 1 cup of water on the engineering console has visible ripples. Small, constant. The building is safe, but the valley is reminding us that it is not far away. 5:59. The volcanic monitoring team has changed the mountain's operational status, not because an eruption has begun. There is still no confirmed eruption. The change reflects continuing instability on the western flank. Monitoring indicates ongoing subsidence and continued material entering the upper drainage. Scientists cannot currently characterize the affected western zone as stable. That is the important sentence. The duration and total volume remain uncertain. We have moved beyond the question of whether the first Lahar pulse is large. The question now is how long the source continues feeding it. One volcanologist working with the response has admitted that available models are much better at describing stable slopes and sudden catastrophic failures than they are at describing hours of progressive internal deformation. The models are not useless. They are guiding evacuation. They are helping estimate inundation. But the source behavior itself does not fit neatly into one familiar box. That is a scientifically uncomfortable place. Not because something supernatural is happening, because nature is under no obligation to fail in the clean categories our diagrams prefer. 6:04. A downstream surge is moving through portions of the system. This is not confirmed as a second major mountain failure. The current explanation is release of water and debris from a temporary blockage. The first flow can build its own dams. Those dams can hold water, then fail. When they fail, the valley experiences another pulse even if the mountain sends nothing new at that exact moment. This surge is expected to be smaller than the initial front in some locations. Smaller does not mean safe. Channels are altered. Bridges are already loaded with debris. Structures are weakened. Road surfaces may have been undermined. Material left by the first flow can be picked up again. Emergency crews are withdrawing from several low approaches they had only begun to assess. This is why there is still no all clear. The disaster is beginning to create secondary disasters from its own debris. 6:09. I received another call, not from my sister. A volunteer working near one of the pedestrian evacuation corridors found a phone beside a dropped bag. The emergency contact information led him to the station. It is my sister's phone. He does not know where she is. The phone was found with several items people apparently dropped while being redirected uphill. No sign of injury at the location. No information beyond that. So I am back where many of you are. A person was alive. A person was moving. Then a device was found without them. That is not evidence of death. It is not evidence of injury. It is evidence that a phone was dropped during an evacuation. The mind wants to turn objects into answers. Do not let it. A phone is a phone. A shoe is a shoe. A backpack is a backpack. Until a person is found, the person is unknown. I am repeating that because I need to hear it too. 6:13. Daylight is now revealing what darkness hid. High ground observers describe broad gray-brown sediment deposits across portions of the valley. Road lines disappear beneath them. Fields that were separate yesterday now look like one continuous surface. Trees lie across roads. Vehicles have been moved. Some are clustered against barriers and structures. Emergency crews are dividing the region into 3 immediate problems: rescue, access, secondary hazards. Rescue is locating people who did not reach safe terrain. Access is determining which roads and bridges can support responders. Secondary hazards include unstable buildings, electrical faults, fuel systems, industrial materials, damaged utilities, and additional water surges. The Lahar is no longer the only emergency. It has become the environment in which every other emergency must now be solved. Shelters are processing more evacuees. Names are being written down manually because digital systems are inconsistent. That may sound primitive. It is resilient. Paper does not lose signal. One shelter coordinator told Emergency Relay that family reunification lists are being duplicated by hand before transmission. Names, birth years, phone numbers when available, where found, medical needs, destination if transferred. That is what recovery begins as. Not a helicopter shot. A list. 6:17. I received a message from Ethan Cole. He was apparently already dressed and preparing to drive to the station when the Tacoma advisory expanded. He stayed home. Good. Ethan, stay there. I thanked you at the beginning of this morning for holding this desk while I was away. You can help the station most now by not becoming one more vehicle on a road emergency workers may need. That applies to everyone listening outside the direct impact area. Do not self-deploy. Do not drive toward shelters with supplies, unless an official request tells you what is needed and where. Do not decide that because you own a truck, you are now part of a rescue convoy. Good intentions can block roads. Good intentions can create additional victims. Help when the system can receive your help. Until then, staying out of the way is a form of help. 6:20. We have a shelter coordinator on the emergency relay. They have completed another batch of names from people who arrived on foot. My sister's name is on it. Checked in at 6:02. Minor injury. No immediate transport required. Alive. I have spent almost 3 hours telling people not to turn incomplete information into certainty. I am very glad I listened to myself. I do not have a dramatic statement. Thank you to the volunteer who found her phone. Thank you to the person who carried that phone to somebody who knew what to do with it. Thank you to the clinic staff who moved patients. Thank you to whoever walked beside her when the road stopped. And if she can hear this from the shelter, stay there. Do not come looking for me. I know where I am. For everyone else waiting on a name, we stay with you. The fact that I received my answer does not mean the emergency is finished. Thousands of families still have less information than I do. We keep broadcasting. 6:23. The sun is beginning to rise behind broken cloud. Mount Rainier is visible from several northern cameras. The image may become one of the defining images of this morning. The upper mountain is white. The summit is intact. There is no towering eruption column, no glowing crater, no plume explaining the valley below. A dark scar is becoming visible on part of the western flank. The glacier surface in the affected zone appears uneven. From this distance, the mountain still looks recognizably like Rainier. Then the camera angle moves down. Closed roads, sediment, emergency lights, evacuated industrial lots, a river that no longer follows the clean shape shown on yesterday's map. That contrast is the event. The mountain looks almost calm. The valley records what happened inside it. 6:28. The best current scientific reconstruction is coming together. This remains preliminary. Sometime before the first public detector activation, a broad zone of hydrothermally weakened material beneath part of Rainier's western glacier system began deforming. The trigger is unknown. Possible contributors include groundwater pressure, long-term alteration, thermal change, glacial loading, seasonal water movement, or a combination. Instead of breaking as one catastrophic block, the material may have begun to move gradually. Saturated clay-rich rock deformed. Water mixed through it, the glacier above settled, material accelerated downslope. By the time the moving mass entered the confined drainage, it had become energetic enough to register strongly on Lahar detectors. It then incorporated more water, more sediment, trees, rock, channel material. The flow grew. Temporary blockages formed and released, and because the source continued feeding material, the event lasted far longer than a single sudden collapse pulse. That model explains much of what happened. It does not explain everything. The temperature history is still being reviewed. The earliest sensor timing remains imperfect. The exact source volume remains uncertain. Scientists still do not know whether more of the western flank will destabilize. This is why the monitoring status remains elevated. An explanation can be mostly correct and still be insufficient for an all clear. 6:34. One scientist has described a problem with how people think about hazard models. Models are scenarios. They are not prophecies. A map showing arrival time assumes a particular volume, source, speed, channel condition, and sequence. Change those assumptions, and the outcome changes. Tonight's event did not behave like the fastest catastrophic collapse model. That gave some communities more time. It also continued longer. That created different problems. People farther downstream interpreted slower arrival as weaker danger. Some delayed evacuation because the first estimated time passed without impact. That is an important lesson. If a model says a flow may arrive within 40 minutes and 45 minutes passes, that does not mean the threat has expired. It means one modeled scenario did not occur exactly. The physical event gets the final vote. Sensors, field reports, river behavior. Those became more important than the earliest clock estimate. That distinction may become central to the investigation. Why did some people remain after the expected arrival time passed? Because human beings turn estimates into promises. Emergency language has to fight that instinct. 6:39. Cellular service is now unavailable or unreliable across broad parts of the affected lowlands. Several towers have lost commercial power. At least one site is inaccessible. Fiber routes crossing the valley have been interrupted. Landlines are inconsistent. Emergency radio remains the most reliable regional system. AM 1720 is operating normally at the transmitter. We have switched several internal systems to backup power as a precaution. Fuel reserves are adequate. The FRB Emergency Network continues to relay county and state information through redundant paths. If you are using a battery radio, conserve batteries where possible. If you have more than one set, do not run every radio in the house. One receiver is enough. If you are at a shelter, do not keep a phone continuously searching for cellular service if you need to preserve the battery. Airplane mode between check periods may extend battery life. Follow shelter staff instructions for charging. Again, ordinary details, but disaster survival is mostly ordinary details under abnormal pressure. 644. Search and rescue operations are beginning in selected areas where flow activity has decreased enough to permit entry. This will be slow. Rescuers are not driving straight down every road. They are checking bridge stability, ground depth, debris movement, electrical hazards, gas leaks, secondary channels. They are marking buildings. They are listening. They are working from edges toward areas of greater uncertainty. Do not enter behind them. Do not follow rescue vehicles. If your home is in an affected zone and you are safe on high ground, your property can wait. The presence of emergency personnel does not mean public reentry has begun. There is still no all clear. That phrase is becoming repetitive because the temptation to go back is becoming stronger. People can see daylight. They can see neighborhoods. They can see that some houses are still standing. Standing is not the same as safe. A structure can remain upright with a damaged foundation. A road can look dry over a washed-out base. A bridge can look intact above damaged supports. Wait. 649. Tacoma's low industrial corridor remains restricted. Emergency teams are assessing fuel storage, chemical facilities, rail equipment, electrical substations, and damaged utility lines. One small fire associated with electrical equipment has been contained from a safe position. There is still no confirmed large fuel tank rupture. Air monitoring teams are being deployed because disturbed sediment, fuel, dust, and industrial materials can create respiratory hazards even after the water stops moving. If you smell fuel or strong chemical odor near an evacuation boundary, move farther away and notify authorities. Do not assume every sulfur-like smell means volcanic gas. The flow itself contains freshly disturbed mineral material. Industrial sources may also contribute odors downstream. This is another reason the disaster becomes harder to interpret as it enters a city. At the mountain, one smell may have one likely source. At a port, the same smell may have 10. 654. Aerial teams have returned to the western flank. The rate of surface subsidence appears slower than it was earlier. That is cautiously encouraging. Not an all clear. Additional internal movement is still being detected. Scientists are watching for signs of a larger structural break around the disturbed zone. The concern is not that Rainier is about to explode. The concern is whether progressive weakening has changed stress on adjacent material. Imagine removing wet soil from beneath one part of a heavy slope. The slope above adjusts. The boundaries around the removed material adjust. Sometimes the adjustment stabilizes. Sometimes it transfers stress. We do not yet know which. This is why people evacuated from the valley may remain away for many hours. The source must stabilize. The downstream system must stabilize. Roads must be assessed. Utilities must be assessed. Then re-entry can begin. Recovery has an order. Ignoring that order creates another emergency. 659. I have a shelter message from a father searching for his adult son. The son worked overnight at an industrial yard near the river. The facility evacuated. The son's name is not on the first shelter lists. His phone is unreachable. The family has been told he may have left with co-workers toward a different reception point. I am not giving the name on air because emergency services have not asked us to. I am mentioning the situation because it represents hundreds of families. A disaster produces many different kinds of missing. Physically missing. Communications missing. Administrative missing. Someone can be safe and still absent from the list you are checking. Shelter lists are not synchronized perfectly. People move between facilities. Phones die. Names are misspelled. People leave with friends. Do not interpret one empty search result as the end of the search. The system is catching up to the people. 703. Digital navigation services remain unreliable in the affected area. Several roads listed as open are physically closed. One road listed as delayed is buried under debris. Another route appears usable on a navigation map, but terminates at a bridge closed by law enforcement. This is not a failure unique to one company. Mapping systems depend on information arriving. The landscape changed faster than the database. That sentence applies to more than navigation this morning. The river map is wrong. The traffic map is wrong. Some utility maps are wrong. In a few places, the road itself is no longer where the road functionally was. If you are directed by emergency personnel, follow the physical instruction in front of you. Do not argue with an officer because your phone shows a blue line continuing through a closure. The blue line remembers yesterday. The officer is standing in today. 706. We have been on continuous emergency coverage for 3 hours and 25 minutes. The flow has reached Tacoma. The western source remains active but appears to be slowing. Secondary surges remain possible. No major eruption has occurred. No ash column has formed. The mountain is under elevated monitoring because its western flank is unstable. Ording, Sumner, Puyallup, Fife, and Tacoma's low industrial areas are dealing with varying degrees of impact. Evacuation orders remain active. Search and rescue has begun selectively. And the question that opened this broadcast has changed again. At first, how can there be a Lahar if the volcano did not erupt? Then, what collapsed? Then, why is the source still active? Now, what does it mean to say the event is ending when the mountain, river, roads, and city are all operating on different timelines? That is where we are. 710. We are beginning to receive questions about casualties. I will not give you an unofficial number. Emergency agencies are not ready to provide one. There are confirmed injuries. There are rescue operations. There are people unaccounted for. There are damaged structures. Those facts do not add up cleanly to a casualty count. Early disaster numbers are often wrong because the same person can appear in multiple lists. Someone reported missing by family may later appear at a shelter. Someone transported to a hospital may not be on a shelter list. A rescue call can involve a building with nobody inside. A damaged home can be empty. We will wait. If another station gives you a precise number without identifying where it came from, treat that precision cautiously. People are not statistics to be guessed at for speed. 716. We have confirmation that the clinic where my sister worked was evacuated before the main debris impact reached that immediate area. Staff moved ambulatory patients first. Emergency vehicles took patients requiring transport. The final group left on foot after road access became unreliable. The building has since taken water and sediment on the lower level. No one is currently believed trapped inside. That information matters to me personally. It also demonstrates something important about warning systems. The building was damaged. The people were not required to remain inside it simply because it was a medical facility. Evacuation planning included moving care. Sometimes the safest hospital room is another building. Sometimes the safest workplace is a hill. Planning looks excessive until the day it is used. 721. Ethan sent another message. He says from his home outside the hazard zone, he never heard the Lahar. He heard the city responding to it. Sirens at a distance. Helicopters. More emergency vehicles than normal. Phones alerting. Neighbors opening doors. That is what most people in a metropolitan disaster experience, not the natural event directly, the systems reacting to it. This is why institutional behavior matters so much. A person may never see the flow. They decide whether to leave based on a siren, a text alert, a radio voice, an officer in an intersection, a neighbor knocking. When those systems are clear, people move. When those systems contradict each other, people hesitate. That may become one of the largest lessons from this morning. 726. Emergency workers are reporting several recurring reasons people delayed evacuation. They could see Rainier and it looked normal. They expected an eruption before a Lahar. They thought the sirens were a test. They waited for a phone alert after hearing the outdoor warning. They waited for a spouse to return home. They believed their building was strong enough. They thought the modeled arrival time had passed. None of those decisions came from stupidity. They came from trying to make an unfamiliar danger fit familiar rules. That is why hazard education matters. You cannot improvise understanding at 3:40 in the morning while a siren is sounding. If you live near a specific natural hazard, learn its strange versions too. Earthquakes are not always the first warning. Volcanoes do not always erupt before volcanic debris moves. Floodwater does not always look like clean water. A quiet sky does not guarantee a quiet valley. 731. We have the most encouraging scientific update of the morning. The rate of material entering the upper drainage has decreased significantly over the last observation period. Not stopped, decreased. Surface subsidence in the western failure zone also appears to be slowing. Monitoring teams are not seeing evidence of a rapidly expanding fracture around the entire flank. That reduces concern about an immediate larger sector collapse. Reduces, does not eliminate. The current scientific language is cautious stabilization. That is the first phrase today containing stabilization. It is not an all clear, but it is the first movement in that direction. Downstream, however, the valley still has hours of work before anyone should think about returning. The source can slow before the consequences stop. 736. Sediment-laden water has entered Commencement Bay from the Puyallup system. A broad discoloration is visible near the river mouth. Floating debris is being reported. Marine traffic is restricted near the affected area. The significance is partly symbolic. Material that began inside and beneath Rainier's western flank has traveled through the river system into the salt water of Puget Sound. The mountain-to-bay pathway is complete, but do not imagine one continuous wall moving all 50 miles with the same shape. The event transformed along the way. Upper slope failure, confined Lahar, widened debris flow, flooded lowland, industrial inundation, sediment plume, same event, different forms. That is why the title Lahar is accurate but incomplete by the time the material reaches Tacoma. 742. One upper detector has dropped below the sustained debris flow threshold. Then a second. The third remains elevated. This is the first time since before 4 this morning that multiple upper stations have shown a clear decline. Scientists are comparing those signals with aerial observation before changing guidance. Nobody wants to repeat the mistake of assuming quiet equals finished. Temporary blockages can silence one part of a system while storing energy somewhere else. The detector decline is good. We are going to call it good data. Not good news yet. Good data. 747. My sister has borrowed a phone at the shelter. One message reached the station. She says she is fine. Her ankle is hurt. She lost her phone while helping another person over a barrier on the evacuation route. That explains the abandoned device. She says the clinic team is accounted for. And she says I am not allowed to turn this into a speech about how I was right about evacuation drills. Fair. I will not. Not today. Maybe next week. That is the most normal thing I have heard since 341. I appreciate it. 751. Shelter databases are beginning to synchronize. The number of family reunification requests is dropping as names move between lists. Some people reported missing earlier are now confirmed at shelters. Others are at hospitals. Others left the area entirely and only recently reached working cellular service. There are still unresolved cases. Search teams continue, but this is why we waited before giving you a dramatic number. Information improves. The story changes. The first version of a disaster is usually written by absence. The later version is written by finding out what the absence meant. 756. Transportation officials are warning that some roads may remain closed for an extended period. Not simply because mud is on top. Debris flows can remove road base, change drainage, scour bridge approaches, pile sediment several feet deep, bury culverts, shift channels. The repair problem is not clean the road, it is determine whether the thing under the road is still a road. Rail lines face similar assessment. Industrial access may take days. Some neighborhoods may remain isolated even after the immediate hazard decreases. This is the beginning of the long part. News coverage will eventually move from sirens to numbers, from numbers to damage estimates, from damage estimates to cleanup. But people who live there will still be navigating altered streets after the broadcast stops being continuous. 8:02. Engineers are already reviewing the warning sequence. The system did not fail in the simple sense. Detectors activated. Sirens sounded. Evacuations occurred. Many people reached high ground before impact. But the event revealed timing weaknesses. Some communications links delayed data. Some people waited for multiple alert types to agree. Some navigation systems remained outdated. Some residents misunderstood what the sirens meant because they were looking for an eruption that never came. The lesson will not be that the warning system was useless. The lesson may be that a warning system includes more than sensors. It includes public understanding, power, communications, roads, signs, practice, trust. A perfect detector cannot move someone who does not know what its siren means. 8:07. Listen to how official language has changed since the beginning. Initial anomaly. Debris flow detection. Precautionary evacuation. Confirmed Lahar. Expanded evacuation. Continuous source. Unstable western flank. No all clear. Cautious stabilization. That is how institutions show fear and then control. Not by shouting. By changing one phrase at a time. The first time the word precautionary disappeared, the emergency became real to people. The first time the word continuous appeared, they realized the first wave would not end it. The first time stabilization appeared, people finally heard a direction other than worse. Language is part of emergency infrastructure. Words move people too. 8:12. Rainier is fully visible now, in breaks between cloud. The summit remains unchanged to the naked eye from many viewpoints. The western disturbance is difficult to see unless you know where to look. This is going to bother people. A disaster of this scale feels like it should leave a dramatic wound visible from everywhere. Nature does not promise visual proportion. A small-looking scar can feed a large downstream process if the right material, water, slope, and channel combine. The mountain is still there. The valley is still there. But both are different this morning. 8:16. We have a renewed vibration signal from one upper station. Before anyone reacts to that sentence, the signal is weaker than the original event. Scientists believe it may represent localized secondary movement within the disturbed source zone. No new evacuation expansion has been issued. Existing evacuation orders remain. This is exactly why high ground restrictions continue. Stabilization is not a switch. A slope can slow, shift, settle, and move again without returning to full failure. Monitoring teams are watching closely. No change in volcano eruption status. No explosive activity. no ash. The hazard remains structural and hydrological. 821. I want to correct a phrase appearing in several headlines. Rainier woke up. That is not what scientists are saying. The volcano did not wake up in the conventional volcanic sense. There is no evidence right now of magma rising toward an eruption. The mountain's hydrothermal and structural system experienced a major failure. That distinction matters. Calling everything volcanic an eruption makes people less prepared for hazards that do not look like eruption. This morning is the clearest example possible. The mountain did not need to wake up. Gravity was already awake. Water was already there. Weak rock was already there. The slope was already there. Sometimes the ingredients of disaster are ancient. Only the balance is temporary. 826. There are 3 timelines in this story. The geological timeline began centuries ago when rock inside Rainier was altered and weakened. The emergency timeline began before 4 this morning when detectors activated. The human timeline began at different moments for different people. When a siren woke them, when a phone rang, when a neighbor knocked, when a road stopped, when they heard the roar, when water appeared, when the lights went out. That is why 2 people can describe the same disaster as sudden and slow. To a geologist, the failure may have been preparing for centuries. To a resident, it happened between waking up and putting on shoes. 831. Officials are beginning to discuss controlled assessment access in a small number of peripheral zones. This is not public re-entry. Emergency and utility personnel only. No neighborhood has been broadly cleared for residents to return at this time. The temptation to move early will grow as more video appears online. Please resist it. Video is a narrow frame. A road can look clear, while a bridge beyond the camera is closed. A house can look untouched while utilities are unsafe. A dry patch can sit beside a new channel. Wait for your specific zone. Emergency orders are geographic. An all clear in one location will not automatically apply 5 miles downstream. 836. We now understand why early evacuation mattered. The Lahar did not reach every downstream community at the fastest modeled time. That delay saved people only because many treated the warning as real before impact. Where people waited for visual confirmation, evacuation became harder. Where traffic began before the roads were threatened, more people moved by vehicle. Where traffic began late, people had to abandon vehicles. 1 hour is an unusual unit. Too long to feel immediate when nothing is visible. Too short to reorganize an entire town once everyone decides to move at once. That is the tension of Lahar warning. The danger may be tens of miles away, but the useful time belongs to the person who starts moving first. 8:40 a.m. 1720 remains stable. The main transmitter is on commercial power. Backup generators remain ready. Our primary data connection is still down. Secondary relay is functioning. One Valley receiver remains offline. Another has returned intermittently. The emergency network has asked stations to conserve non-essential bandwidth. We are doing that. This broadcast is now mostly voice and verified text relay. Simple, reliable. I started the night joking that Ethan left the desk cleaner than I do. The desk currently has 3 maps, 2 battery packs, handwritten shelter lists, 1 emergency handbook, 4 pens, a cup of coffee I have forgotten to drink for almost 5 hours, and a phone that belongs to my sister, sitting in an evidence bag waiting to be returned. So Ethan, your work has been undone. I apologize. 8:45. People at shelters are beginning to ask when they can see photographs of their neighborhoods. Some already have. That can be difficult. A person can be physically safe and still receive the first image of everything they own, covered in mud. Do not underestimate that shock. Shelter staff are being asked to provide private areas for families receiving bad news. Mental health teams are being activated. Children who evacuated at 4 in the morning are now awake enough to understand adults are worried. Keep explanations simple. Do not show children graphic footage to prove the emergency was real. They believed the siren. That was enough. Adults sometimes need images to process scale. Children often need routine, food, warmth, a familiar person, something ordinary. 8:50. Upper monitoring continues to trend downward. The renewed signal at 8:16 did not grow into another major release. Aerial teams see no evidence of an expanding catastrophic fracture. Scientists are increasingly confident the most intense source phase has passed. I want to phrase that exactly. Most intense source phase has passed. That is not the same as event over. Downstream water and debris remain active. Secondary flows remain possible. The damaged valley remains hazardous. But for the first time, the mountain itself appears to be moving toward stability rather than away from it. 8:55. If you are listening from a shelter, a school gym, a parked car on high ground, a friend's house, an emergency vehicle, or the floor of a hallway where you finally sat down after walking uphill in the dark, this part is for you. You did not overreact. If your home turns out to be untouched, you still did not overreact. If the flow stopped one street short of your neighborhood, you still did not overreact. If you carried your child uphill and later learned the road remained dry, you still made the correct decision. Emergency warnings are not bets where you win by staying. They are systems designed to move you before certainty arrives. You can be inconvenienced by a correct evacuation. You cannot be rescued by the time you saved ignoring one. 8:58. Here is what we can verify as we approach the end of this continuous phase. A major lahar began on Mount Rainier's western drainage before dawn. The event occurred without a confirmed explosive eruption. The best current explanation is progressive failure of hydrothermally weakened, water-saturated material beneath and around part of the western glacier system. The source appears to have developed gradually rather than as one single catastrophic rockfall. That may explain why the seismic warning picture was less obvious than expected. The moving material entered the Puyallup drainage, incorporated additional water and sediment, and developed into a sustained lahar. The flow impacted the Ording corridor. It continued through the Puyallup Valley. It affected Sumner and Puyallup lowlands. Debris-laden flooding reached Tacoma's low industrial and tide flats areas. Sediment entered Commencement Bay. The source remained active for hours. Secondary surges occurred. The western failure zone is now showing increasing signs of stabilization. No all clear has been issued for the main affected lowlands. Search and rescue continues. Damage assessment continues. Family reunification continues. 9:03. We still do not know the exact trigger. We do not know the final volume. We do not know why one part of the detector timing remains inconsistent with the earliest reconstructed flow model. We do not know how much weakened material remains capable of movement inside the affected flank. We do not know the final human cost. We do not know how long some roads, rail lines, neighborhoods, and industrial facilities will remain inaccessible. We do not know how many people will return to homes that can be repaired. We do not know how many will return to an empty piece of land covered in sediment. Science has explained much of the mechanism. It has not converted the morning into a clean story. Real disasters rarely end with the same clarity they begin with. The siren is simple. Leave. The aftermath is complicated. 9:07. My sister is safe. Her ankle is injured. Her clinic team is accounted for. Her phone is here. She is somewhere else. That is a better ending than many families have received this morning. I am aware of that. I am not going to turn my relief into the conclusion of the broadcast. There are people waiting for someone who has not appeared on a shelter list. There are people being taken to hospitals. There are rescuers entering damaged zones. There are emergency workers who have been awake since before the first detector triggered. There are families who have not yet seen what happened to their homes. The story continues after my family's uncertainty ends. 9/11. When I walked into this station tonight, I thought my return was the story. A few days away. Ethan Cole keeping the desk. A joke about coffee. A familiar voice back on overnight radio. That was less than 6 hours ago. There is something useful in that. Emergencies interrupt ordinary life. They do not replace the fact that ordinary life existed. Before the sirens, somebody was finishing a shift. Somebody was feeding a baby. Somebody was arguing about dishes. Somebody was asleep. Somebody was driving home. Somebody was leaving a clinic. Somebody was putting coffee beside a radio console. That ordinary world does not become meaningless because disaster arrives. It becomes the thing everyone is trying to return to. 9:14. When the sun came up this morning, Mount Rainier was still there. That may sound obvious, but look at what people expected. A mountain capable of producing this much destruction should look destroyed. It does not. A volcano responsible for this kind of emergency should have erupted. It did not. There should have been fire in the sky. There was none. There should have been a giant earthquake warning everybody first. There was not. What people received instead was a detector, a siren, a route sign, a radio instruction, move uphill. Simple things. Simple things carried people through an event too large to understand while it was happening. Remember that. The mountain does not owe you a dramatic warning. The river does not owe you a visible approach. The road does not owe you enough time to change your mind. If the system built for a specific danger tells you the danger has begun, act while the explanation is still incomplete. You can ask why from high ground. 9:18. AM 1720 is transitioning from continuous emergency narration to scheduled verified updates. The FRB Emergency Network will remain active. Evacuation orders, shelter information, transportation closures, reunification information, and public safety notices will continue on this frequency. If conditions worsen again, we return immediately. Ethan Cole, thank you for holding the station together while I was gone. You kept the chair ready. I came back to it on the wrong morning. To the emergency crews moving into the valley, be careful. To the people on high ground, stay there until your specific area is cleared. To the families waiting for names, keep checking. Lists are still changing. And to everyone looking east at Mount Rainier and wondering how something so still could have done this. By the time the mountain looked dangerous enough to convince you, the dangerous part had already left it. This is Daniel Hale, AM 1720, Fictional Radio Broadcast, live reports from fictional events. We will remain on the FRB Emergency Network, and for now, we are still here.